Let's just jump right in. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are unpacking an absolutely fascinating piece of source material. It's a really specific, incredibly powerful historical analysis looking at the 1835 Malê Revolt. And we're talking about a story of just pure resilience, massive organization, and, well, a completely unexpected tool for rebellion. Honestly, if you think you already know the standard history of uprisings under enslavement, you are absolutely going to want to stick around for this one.
So right off the bat, we have to ask, how exactly did enslaved Muslims organize a massive uprising back in 1835? Think about it. Under the brutal, completely restrictive conditions of enslavement, how do you even begin to coordinate a large-scale unified rebellion? I mean, you've got constant surveillance, heavily restricted movement, deliberate attempts to completely erase culture and communication. It's like being in a pressure cooker with no valve. Yet this massive mobilization actually happened. How? Well, it completely challenges our assumptions because they utilized a tool that their captors fundamentally underestimated. Actually, scratch that. They didn't even understand it at all.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the answer comes down to just two words: Arabic literacy. The source material we're diving into points to this as the absolute core of the revolt. You see, this wasn't just about shared faith. It was a highly sophisticated pre-existing communication network. Because many of the enslaved Muslims involved had deep backgrounds in reading and writing Arabic, they had a secret weapon. To the people enslaving them, it just looked like, foreign scribbles. But to the organizers, it was a secure, fully encrypted language. It literally allowed them to plan and coordinate right under the noses of their captors.
So that brings us to part one, an overlooked history.
We're actually breaking down an evaluator's analysis of a historical script today. And the evaluator specifically calls it, quote, a powerful and well-structured script that highlights a vital, often overlooked piece of history. We aren't just looking at the raw history here, we're looking at how modern historians are piecing this incredible narrative together to uncover these hidden truths. The analysis confirms that this core story, the sheer literacy and resistance of these enslaved Muslims, is just absolutely fundamental to how we understand the entire era.
Moving right along to Part 2, Literacy as Resistance.
So, the crucial point is the year 1835. This was the breaking point. This is when the pressure finally snapped, and the uprising was executed. Grounding ourselves in this specific year really helps us feel the immense historical weight of the whole thing. This wasn't some spontaneous riot. Not at all. It was the culmination of deliberate, literate, strategic planning that led right up to 1835. The sources make it super clear that the ability to read and write was the literal engine driving them toward this exact moment in time.
And here's how that engine of resistance actually worked in practice. First, they shared this Arabic literacy. Second, they used that shared language and religious background to unify enslaved Muslims who otherwise might have been totally separated by different regional African languages or different, circumstances of their enslavement. And finally, and this is the real game changer, this unity and literacy allowed them to covertly organize the entire uprising. The communication was completely invisible to their captors. It was a highly sophisticated, deeply hidden network of rebellion.
But the story definitely doesn't stop in 1835. Let's shift over to Part 3, the Lagos Legacy.
So, there's a physical bridge across continents here, and it's called the Brazilian Mosque. The source material highlights this as a massively significant historical connection. Get this, survivors of the 1835 revolt eventually made their way across the ocean all the way back to Lagos, Nigeria. And what did they do when they got there? They built a mosque. This structure is a tangible architectural legacy of the Malê Revolt. It perfectly shows how the culture, the faith, and the sheer identity that fueled the uprising managed to survive the brutal aftermath of the revolt and get permanently cemented right back into the soil of West Africa.
All right, which brings us to Part 4, Grounding the Facts.
The evaluator of this script draws a really sharp line between two different ways of telling this story. On one side, you have your basic narrative, just simply stating that an uprising occurred in 1835, which is fine, but it's pretty dry, right? On the other side, you have the deep narrative. This means using emotional primary accounts and using the actual specific names of the scholars who led the movement. The evaluator stresses that pulling these emotional primary accounts out of the historical records is absolutely essential. It's what takes a dry script and turns it into a history that genuinely, deeply resonates with people today.
And the sources keep highlighting one very specific number, 10. We absolutely need to verify the specific names of the 10 scholars who led this uprising. Why does that even matter? Well, because history is made by people,
not just broad, nameless movements. By verifying and using the exact names of these 10 individuals, we give this narrative so much personal weight. We transform them from anonymous figures in a textbook into distinct, brilliant human beings who use their intellect and their literacy to fight for their freedom.
Now, there is a bit of a hurdle here. The project we're looking at currently lacks the specific primary documents to fully ground these facts. The foundational script is incredibly strong, no doubt about it, and the narrative is essential, but the evaluator points out that these raw primary documents are currently missing, and without them, we just can't fully validate these incredible claims. We know those 10 scholars exist in the history, we know the emotional primary accounts are out there somewhere, but they desperately need to be brought directly into the research to make this whole thing bulletproof.
So the source provides a really clear path forward for us. Step 1, fact-check the specific names of those 10 scholars. Step 2, extract those deeply emotional primary accounts directly from the historical records. And Step 3, expand this entire thing into a comprehensive educational resource. The evaluator actually suggests that a short-form explainer, kind of like the script being analyzed, is the perfect hook to launch a much larger series. By taking these facts, you could create a detailed study guide to really educate people on the profound depth of the Malê Revolt.
Now, to actually go out and gather this missing evidence, the evaluator gives us two potential paths. Do we build a tailored report, a custom fact sheet specifically targeting these claims about Arabic literacy and the 10 scholars, or do we rely on fast research, just casting a massive net through existing academic papers and historical records to plug those holes? Basically, it's a choice between laser focus and broad context. Which approach do you think would best complete the project? Ultimately, the evaluator's conclusion is crystal clear, and this brilliantly illustrates their point. This is a powerful, totally vital script. Even though it needs those primary sources and the specific names of the 10 scholars, the core truth of the matter remains undeniable. The 1835 Malê Revolt is just a monumental testament to organization, the sheer power of a shared language, and an unyielding resilience in the face of absolute crushing oppression.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a question to chew on. How does recovering these lost, vital historical voices change our understanding of the past? Think about it. When we realize that enslaved individuals back in 1835 were using complex Arabic literacy to orchestrate massive resistance networks and leaving architectural legacies as far away as Lagos, Nigeria, it forces us to completely reevaluate the depth and sophistication of historical resistance. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other incredible stories of intellect and rebellion are just sitting in the archives, waiting for their primary documents to finally be brought to light? Thank you so much for exploring this with me today.